In Throne of Liberty there are two major stats which help you getting more tanky in PvP, Evasion and Endurance. And it's important to understand how they behave, because otherwise you may be completely wasting your stats, while others are abusing this knowledge. This could mean you will be killed over and over in PvP, while you just deal zero damage to other players. But don't you worry, I've got you covered in this guide. We will break down both Evasion and Endurance so you can gear correctly and get a huge advantage in PvP. So let's start with Evasion. When we look at Evasion, we also have to look on Hit, because those two stats just go hand in hand. So Evasion gives you the chance to completely dodge a skill attack from your enemy. That means not only the damage but also the CC, a weaken or whatsoever. But you can counter Evasion with Hit. Like for most of the stats in Throne of Liberty, Evasion and Hit is split into the three main attack types: melee, magic and ranged. If you want to evade a melee attack, you need melee evasion. And if you want to hit a melee attack, then you need melee hit. The game always calculates the difference between your evasion and the enemy hit. If you have more evasion than your enemy, then you have a chance to evade an attack. In this table you have some example values to get a feeling for those numbers. So if you have 500 more evasion than your enemy, you have for example 33% chance to evade an attack. And if you have 1000 more evasion, you have a 50% chance to evade an attack. Okay, but if your evasion is lower than your enemy hit, then your evasion is completely useless. So typically most weapon combos with tier 1 gear have around 850 hit, so if the player knows what he's doing. Except for great sword players, they will have something around 1100 hit. But if your evasion is completely useless when it's lower than your enemy hit, you always need more than 850 evasion against a decent player. Otherwise the evasion becomes completely useless. So if you have 700 evasion and your enemy has 800 hit, it's like you're having zero evasion. You have to understand this. So if you want to play with evasion, you have to commit to it and build a lot of evasion. Additionally, don't go all three types of evasion, try to focus on two types. So for example, magic and ranged evasion. Okay, so we understood now Evasion and Hit. Now let's come to Endurance. For Endurance we also have to look on critical hit. So usually your weapon rolls between your min and your max damage when you are doing damage. If you critical hit in Throne of Liberty, it always takes the max damage. If you have more critical hit, it higher your chance of critting. And Endurance lowers the chance that your enemy is actually critting you. It also behaves similar to Evasion and Hit, and takes always the difference between enemy critical hit and your Endurance. In this table again you have example values to get a feeling for those numbers. So if you have 500 more crit than your enemy Endurance, then you have for example a 33% crit chance. And if you have 1000 more crit, then you have again a 50% crit chance. So pretty similar overall, right? But here's one major difference, and this is that Endurance compared to Evasion is always useful. So if for example your enemy has 1000 critical hit and you have 500 endurance, then you would lower the difference by 500, which will of course reduce his crit chance. So if you compare that again to Evasion, if you just have 500 evasion but your enemy has 1000 hit, then the 500 evasion would be completely useless. Additionally, if you actually have more endurance than your enemy crit, then your enemy actually can't crit anymore. And you have a chance now that he's now not rolling anymore between min and max damage, but is now using min damage for his spell. But this is usually in the current meta not really doable. Most people will always have more crit than you can build endurance. Okay, but compared to Evasion, we are only lower the crit chance and not completely dodging an attack. To get a little bit of a better feeling how much damage reduction we are actually getting from Endurance, I calculated here the average damage reduction per 200 Endurance. The link to the calculation you can find in the video description. The nice thing is that we are actually know how much damage reduction we are getting for 200 points of Endurance. But this table is only relevant for tier 1 gear. When we are getting tier 2 gear, runes and whatsoever, we have to do that again. But the nice thing in this table is that we can now clearly see that each point in endurance has some value. Of course it's getting better and better if we stack it up, but even if you just have 600 endurance for a certain attack type, it is still valuable. And with this table you can always ask yourself, is it worth it now to invest into 200 more endurance or better go for another stat? Okay, let's come to a conclusion. Evasion is by far more impactful because we are able to evade all attacks, debuffs and also CCs, but you need to heavily stack it to make it useful. And this means more than 1000 ranged and magic evasion and more than 1200 melee evasion. Everything below is more or less wasted points. If you don't want to stack that much evasion, you always go endurance, because each point of endurance is useful. But still, the more you stack here, the more useful it gets. But here you are only reducing the crit chance, which is also giving you some damage reduction in the end, but you can still get hit by debuffs, CCs and so on. So now it's up to you what you want to build in the end. The nice thing about the system is that it gives us players so many possibilities to build and personalize our gear depending on our playstyle, but sometimes it also just gets unnecessarily complex. I usually wanted to make that guide way more complex. I wanted to show a lot of graphs and explain a lot of stuff on the formulas and so on. But while I was already cutting the video, I saw a comment on my healer guide video. Someone saying, "Game is starting to look like a complex math problem, lol." And I was like, damn, people will hate TL after this video or won't even watch it. I need to simplify everything, and here you go. I hope this was now the right detail level. If you have further questions, don't hesitate and ask me in the comment section. And if you like the content and want to support me, like, subscribe and share. Love you all and see you on the next one.